We're going to give folks just another minute or two, and then I'll get started with the presentation that I have today. We will be talking about building and using sessions today. So we'll go through the basics of how to set up a session, how the sessions work, how foldering and all those kinds of options work, and we'll do a little bit of importing from card. This is a quick instructional today. It's not going to be an in-depth advanced class. We've got more of those coming next week. We also are not talking about shooting tethered. That can be hours on its own. We've got a shooting tethered bite-sized learning for next week that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So today is just basic intro to sessions, how you get them set up, how you organize them. So with that said, it looks like the participants have kind of slowed down logging in. Hopefully that means everybody is on time and ready to go. So with that said, I'm gonna just start with the introductions and we'll get rolling. So first and foremost, I want to say hello and thank you for coming and tuning in today. We appreciate you spending some time with us for our third ever virtual bite-sized learning. We started the bite-sized learning series in store as a focused bit of instruction on a small topic that we feel folks in the industry could benefit from. With these crazy times that we have right now, we've pivoted to turn this into a virtual learning series. So you'll see a bunch of Capture One videos coming up. I believe Manny is going to be working on some other things as well, some product reviews or something maybe, or?
Yes, I will be. It will be for IG and for YouTube.
Okay, great. So we'll have more content coming in those places. So, you know, if you can visit our website and link out to our YouTube page and our Instagram, maybe in our next slide base, I'll have links for that at the close out. But so anyhow, we're sharing this today. And as I mentioned earlier, Manny and John Schlesinger are here. They will be answering any tech support questions. Let's make sure Schlesinger is added as a panelist so he can help answer those. When you have questions today, keep them in the Q&A portal. You should see in your toolbar for Zoom, there's both a chat and a Q&A. Please use the Q&A only for questions you want to ask specifically, because it allows us checksums to look at and check off on. So it makes our job a little bit easier. Again, as I mentioned, this is going to be Capture One, kind of an intro to sessions only. We're not talking about catalogs. We're not talking about tethered. We're not talking about advanced features today. It's the setup, the base. We're going to run with that. So as we've got most of the folks in, I'm gonna start going here today. So we're talking, as I mentioned, it's going to be about 30 minutes of instruction between the slides and using Capture One itself. And then 15 minutes or more of questions towards the end, depending upon what y'all need in as far as questions about sessions go. Again, I am your host for today, Anthony Festa. I work in our software and hardware support, as well as a little bit of sales. I teach all of our in-store Capture One training classes. I'm a specialist in medium format support, be it all brands, and have been using Capture One for 17 years now. So real quick recap, if you've tuned in to some of our previous webinars, you will have seen some of these bits because some of it is applicable. Anything I'm recapping here is applicable to today's. If you're tuning in for the first time, then it's definitely beneficial. Capture One. It's a fast and intuitive workflow that can be customized to fit your unique needs, contains a flexible digital asset management, and all the essential adjustment tools. So you can take your raw files all the way out to finished files. It also offers fast and easy tethering upon connection with a variety of shooting tools. Again, our class on Wednesday of next week is going to be the one that showcases tethered shooting. And it is built on the world's best raw processing engine. Renders precise colors and incredible detail. Through years and years of working with files, I have found that I get a better result out of Capture One than I do out of Lightroom processing the same raw file. It's the way that, in my opinion, the folks at Capture One in Denmark have built out their processing engine algorithms, their color science, everything behind it. I have found I get better results here, which is why it is the tool that I use to convert my raw files to TIFF and JPEG. So we're talking about sessions today because, as we know, if we're familiar with Capture One or even if we're not, Capture One has the ability in the Pro module to run into different modes. So there are catalogs, which is the way that Lightroom is built out, and then there are sessions. Where do sessions excel? So if you are working as a digital tech or in a production studio, an e-commerce studio, anything like that, more often than not, if it's a digital tech situation or a digital tech managing the workflow, you are going to be using a session. Also, we have plenty of independent photographers who are working by themselves. Maybe it's still life photographers or small lookbook photographers that are working on an isolated crew where the photographer runs everything. They are also, generally speaking, going to run in sessions. It is easy to manage the shoot data there. It's easy to add files or any data to any session very swiftly. Examples: a fashion job, a still life job, an editorial job, all of these kinds of things you are going to see being set up and used in a session. As I mentioned earlier, vast majority of all your commercial shoots, e-commerce shoots, they're going to use sessions because it becomes a nice self-contained package that brings everything with it. You can quickly and easily work on just that job directly. And when set up correctly, the parent folder that you first create is going to house all associated files. So if you need to quickly and easily deliver your RAWs process and all of that, you just grab that parent folder, drag it to the client's hard drive, and send it off. And they've got everything they need to have those raw files with your color, curves, adjustments, and anything that you processed for that job specifically. All right. So first thing we're going to see when we create a session, and I'm going to start here with our slides and give a general overview, and then I am going to switch over to Capture One, and we're going to actually dynamically go through this. But let me give you a breakdown on what everything is here, and we'll go from there. So this is the window when you click Create New Session, and maybe it's old hat to some of you, but let's start and break it down bit by bit. So the top line is where you would put in the session name. So this is manually created by you. It's also the root folder for all items that you are going to find below. The location obviously relates to where your computer stores the session. This is user set. This is able to be changed by the user. By default, both on a Windows machine and a Mac machine, it's going to be in the pictures folder of your computer. Template, we're actually not going to talk about today, but you can actually set up a template that allows you to more quickly have folders and smart albums and things like that set up, but that's a little bit more advanced than what we're talking about today. So we're going to leave that one alone. The capture subfolder, this is where your raw files are going to live. You can use subfolders inside of that to break out your shots if you need further organization. If you're on set and doing 40 fashion looks a day and you're going to have maybe between, I don't know, 50 and 100 frames per of those 40 looks, you don't want it all in one folder because it's going to be really hard to look at all that, edit that. And the more files you have in a session, it might take a little bit longer for the first time for your previews to render when you come out of that folder and go back in. So break it down by shot folder. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The second line down, you see it says selects subfolder. So I'm right here right now. The selects subfolder is kind of a holdover from when the software was first created. And the idea was that when you finished your shot, you move your selects in there so they're all in the same place. I know plenty of still life photographers who still do this kind of thing. With fashion shoots, I've seen it happen a lot less, but it all depends on the user, and it's up to you on how you want to use it. When I spent years working as a digital tech, we actually repurposed the selects folder with a keyboard shortcut. So when you had an image pop up on the screen, you immediately put it in there. And I used it instead, I'm sorry about that, I use it as an outtakes folder because on figure fashion or editorial jobs, more often than not, you'd have those scenes where the stylist walks in or, somebody's goofing off or something like that. And you didn't necessarily want to delete those frames because invariably the stylist or makeup artist or somebody would always ask for a copy of that if they could get it, if there weren't NDAs or anything like that associated with the shoot. And you didn't want to have it deleted, but you also didn't want to have it in the main shot folder because, when the art director is reviewing, they don't want to see that kind of thing. So for me and a lot of my friends who were techs, we'd repurpose it for that. So with one quick keyboard shortcut stroke, we'd send the files there. The next one down, output folder, it's your process file. This is where when you process or export files, they go here. The trash subfolder, that's where when you are inside of a session in Capture One and hit delete, that's where the files wind up. Please note that this, unlike previous iterations of the Capture One software, this has been changed for a couple of years now, but just in case you're a holdover and haven't upgraded in a couple versions, back in the day, the trash used to be a holdover, stopover before it went to the system trash. But now it's the same thing as the system trash. So if you put it into the trash inside of Capture One and then empty the trash in Capture One, the files will be gone forever. And I rename mine to trashy to differentiate it between the actual system trash so I know where things live if I'm doing a Finder window search. The capture name, this is going to automatically pull your session name and drop it in there. I leave that alone because when I come in and set up my tethered, this is only for tethered shooting, I then change that later. So the name for the first tethered shooting is going to come up with whatever's here until you change it. We're pretty much always going to change that, but we'll talk about that next Wednesday. Once we come into Capture One, once we've created it, I would imagine most of you have at least attempted to create a session at this point. This is the window you're going to be greeted with. This is your library view by default. This is where it starts out. So this first drop down right here is going to give you the name of what we're working in. If we were working in a catalog, it would say catalog and then have the catalog name. But because we're sessions today, it says session and then its name. It's a drop down here, so it allows us to automatically very easily switch between the 10 most recent sessions. Below this, these are Capture One hard-coded shortcuts to your current capture folder, your selects folder. Now, if you've renamed that to say outtakes or something like that, like I would have, it'll still say selects right here because that's hard-coded. Down in your library view further down, which we'll get to in a second, it would reflect the name change if you had to have done that. What we see next below that is your output folder and then your trash. So it's just a shortcut so you can view them quickly. Below that are session albums. Session albums are either, they're all virtual albums. They don't create any physical folders whatsoever. It's just organization inside of the session. And the two that you see top that I boxed out in red, 5 stars on all images, those are default for every session you create. Sorry about that. And then the ones below are user-created smart albums. We'll get to that when I actually start working through and building, but they are smart albums are virtual albums that allow you to use a specific subset of data to search. So organization, sessions are mainly comprised of physical folders that you use to create and organize your images. What you create in software, you can find in the Finder. So if we scroll down further, if I was in that same view before and you saw, here is our default shortcuts, here are our default smart albums. These are favorites. These are the folders that relate down in my system browser view if I continue scrolling down in the library. Once I get beyond this section and the favorite section, you will see a system folder and the root tree that you can break out. So our session is named, 2020-04-08 session test. If I scroll through my system browser and I go to my user, go to my pictures folder, and then down to that 2020-04-08 session test, you'll see inside I have created shot folders. And these shot folders are also in Finder. They are physical folders that you create, unlike catalogs. Catalogs would be all virtual albums. You wouldn't see anything once you go to Finder. Now, you'll see these shot folders in 2 places. You see them in my favorites because I have added them there. Now, favorites are important. We'll get to that in a minute. Organization, virtual and physical. So while you're creating your shot folders out of physical folders, sessions also allow you to benefit from some virtual album options, but in a more limited capacity. Smart albums are what I was just briefly talking about. You get 5-star in all images by default, which will show you those images. So what smart albums are, they're virtual albums that display images based on a pre-configured set of search data entered at creation. This is extremely helpful for quick culling of images that will match the search criteria, such as rating, color tag, aperture, camera make, lens, date, ISO, and many more options. So we have the ability to create these. Now, favorites are important because if you do not add your shot folder to favorites, your smart albums will not be able to search them. So by adding to favorites, it indexes that folder and lets Capture One know it's part of the session. And now it's indexed and the contents are able to be searched using smart albums. So you have to do that step. It also saves you the hassle of if the software crashes, having to go back to your system browser, dive all the way down into here to get to your shot folder again, because you've added them to favorites. Even if the software crashes and this whole device tree is collapsed, you just come to your shot one folder, shot two folder, whatever it needs to be, and quickly and easily get back to it. All right. So this allowing the direct access, which is what Sessions also allows you to do through this entire system tree, is helpful because it gives you all direct access to the entire computer system and all the files on your computer. So this allows you to quickly view anything in your computer and quickly add it to a session if need be. This type of access is not available in catalogs, and any file needed must be brought in via the import dialog box. Now you might be asking, why is this important? Why would grabbing a file from my computer be, it doesn't take that long. If you're in a high-paced, e-commerce job or catalog job or something like that, where you're on tight turnarounds, being able to quickly grab a file from, say, Dropbox or, AirDrop, the art director airdrops you a template for the layout or something like that because you want to use it as an overlay. It's really easy to quickly browse to the location where that lives, pull it right into the session without having to open the import dialog box window. It's a lot faster and wouldn't interrupt the view if your photographer is currently shooting. You can still navigate to this and make this happen while images come in if you're working as a digital tech. And finally, we're going to get to importing because that's going to be important for setting up a session, getting your files in. Again, we'll talk about Tethered next week, but today we'll talk about importing our files. When you plug in an SD card or a CF card or an XQD card, CFast card, whatever it happens to be to your card reader that's attached to your computer, this import dialog box is automatically going to pop up. As long as you have that preference turned on. You can actually turn that off if you'd like. I leave it turned on myself. You have a couple of, there's a lot to look at here, and we're going to dive into it in a little bit, but just to kind of break it down quickly, this main window you have right here is the image browser. So it looks at your card and allows you to easily, quickly pick the images that you want to import, or you could just hit import all. But once you click on one image, you've got to highlight the rest of them, and then it'll tell you how many images you're actually importing. Import from is where the images are coming from. It's what the source is. If you don't have a card, you're importing from something that's already in your computer, you would hit the drop down here and choose that folder. Import to is the destination. It's where the files are going to go to. So we'll talk about how to set this up the right way in a moment. We'll briefly touch on backup too when we get to this actual window. Naming is obviously the file name, and you have a lot of choices on this from Capture One. You can preset your copyright and description for metadata on the front load. Those are the only things for metadata you can input on the front load when you download a card. I'm hoping at some point they add the ability to do saved preset, but currently that's not an option just yet. But you do have the ability later on to add that information back if you want the whole address, email, website section of your metadata. Adjustments. This is going to be where you can apply a look that you have already saved. Now, we're not going to talk about creating looks, but I'll touch briefly on how this is what this accomplishes when I plug a card in shortly. And then it'll give you a summary of everything. Down at the bottom, you're going to see a checkbox for eject card and erase images after copying. There's also this drop down that open the collection when import starts. So what this means is as I click import, it's going to open that folder in Capture One so you can see those images coming in. You can disable that in case you're doing something else in the background. The eject card option is actually one that is a digital tech I appreciated, because if I was on a high-paced shoot to card job, I didn't have to, command tab over to Finder to eject that card. The software would do it for me. You can also erase images after copying directly from the software. This is one that personally I have never used. I'm of the mindset to make sure I've got everything backed up before I go towards erasing the card. So it's one that I leave unchecked. I want to make sure I've downloaded that card and I've backed it up to 2 other places before I delete it. So when I'm personally at home working, I plug my card in, I back it up. Once I've ejected it from the card reader, I kind of leave it here until I've made sure I've moved it to 2 other places. I like to make sure I keep everything safe, as we all should, because losing images is never fun. All right, so we're going to come over to Capture One now. And I've got, I minimized out my window, so I'm going to start from fresh. So to create a new session, I'm going to go to File, New. So this is that window, the first window that I talked about previously. This is where I name it. With naming, I always start with the year, the month, and then the date, which I'm actually blanking on. Today's the 10th, not the 11th. I start it this way because in my backup hard drive situation that I've got, when I put all of them into my image folder, everything will line up numerically. So it starts with, going all the way back to 2003 or 4 or whatever. And it all goes numerical, so it's easy for me to find it. That's just my sorting and filing system. You can obviously use whatever you need, but that's why I do it this way. So when it's in Finder, it's easy for me to find in numerical order. Then I give it a unique name, and then we're going to call it Session Setup because that's what we're doing today. You have and again, as I mentioned, the location is going to be by default pictures. If I wanted to send it somewhere else, I'd click the radio button, which brings up other options. For now, we're going to leave it at the default location. We're not going to bother with templates. We'll talk about that at a later point in time. I can change my capture subfolder name, my select subfolder name. Like if I were doing a fashion job right now as a tech, I would likely change this to outtakes. I change my trash name to trashy. So if I'm searching in Finder and it winds up there, I know it's in a session trash and not the computer trash. This is something I was taught by one of the guys who trained me to be a digital tech almost, 15 years ago. So it's kind of a holdover from him in the old days. And again, as I mentioned, I leave capture name alone because I'm just going to change that later. I have the ability to open in a new window or not. What that means is if you've already got one Capture One window open and you want to have multiple Capture One windows open, you leave that box, or you can have it close out the other one and just open this new one. So I'm going to hit OK, and now it's created my session. So you'll notice I've got all the same things we were looking at before. I've got my capture subfolder, my select subfolder. These are all hard-coded to take me where I need to go. Now, if I highlight it, I've got no images in just yet. But if and you'll say, oh, but the selects folder didn't change its name. It didn't here because this is hard-coded and never will change its name. But if I scroll down in my system view here, and I go to my pictures folder, and I go to my folder that's got Capture One sessions, I will then see where I saved it, and I actually forgot to save it in the right place. I didn't save it to the subfolder, I saved it right here. So it's right here is what I'm looking at. Not that one, sorry. This one, because you'll see I renamed my selects folder to outtakes. And how I know it's the same one is this little, I'm gonna zoom in here. This little icon with a little kind of bottom bracket and arrow, that means it's the shortcut for the selects folder. So you'll see that name I changed on the front window does relate inside of the session. It just can't change here because that's hard-coded. So now I've got that. Now what I would do if I were setting this up for a day of shooting is I would add subfolders inside of my capture folder, because we know we're going to shoot 10 frames today. I would highlight the folder by clicking on it, and then you can also rename that folder here if you need to by double clicking on it. So now I would put new inside, and I would choose a folder, and then I would name it. And for today's purposes, I'm just going to call it shot 1. And to make my life easier, I'm going to copy and paste the first few digits of this to speed things up. So now you'll notice that dynamically drops inside, so it's nested. And then I can add another one, hit my paste, hit 2, hang on. And I'm adding folders inside of here. Now, alternatively, because you are physically creating folders on the computer, I can come over to Finder, open a new Finder window, go to my pictures folder, and you'll see I've got those same 2 folders in there right now. I can do the same thing here. And you'll notice if you're looking over here where that is inside of the session, you'll see they're automatically popping up. Capture One knows I'm creating these folders as I go. So this is how I would build out my normal day if I was working on set. I'd have my shot folders arranged already, and I'd set up a test folder for any lighting tests or anything like that, or gray card shots or whatever, so they all live in that folder. I would then come back to Capture One, and I would want to add these files to my session favorites. And again, as the reason I mentioned this previously, so you want to have them be able to be searched, indexed, and associated with the session, so it knows they're there, so it knows what folders to search if I'm going to be using smart albums. So in order to do that, I could either control click on that folder again and do add to favorites, or if I use keyboard shortcuts, which I highly advocate for, you can find them under edit keyboard shortcuts. If I come in here, yours would show up as default for the first time, and you can actually get a summary of what they are. You click this button, it's going to open your browser window that's default. You don't need the internet. You don't need internet access to take advantage of this, but it'll give you a layout of what all the currently configured keyboard shortcuts are, so you can start to learn them, and then you can come in and edit them. And we'll not really dive too deep into this today, but I'm going to activate my personal set, because setting a favorite is not currently a default keyboard shortcut. You have to choose that, but you go in to edit, you edit keyboard shortcuts. First, you have to create your own by clicking the plus button and giving it a name, and then you would come in and you can search for topics. And you'll see if I type in favorite, it automatically comes up, file, add, remove from favorite. And in this keyboard shortcut, I have assigned it Control F, so I can use that. And that's the same way you can go in. Any of them that have a blank space can be changed. Some are hard-coded and can't, like create a new session can't be changed, but some of the other ones can. So now I can just come in, highlight that, highlight the next folder, and then just rapidly add these to favorites. And as I do so, you'll see they get hearts next to them down here, and then they pop up in session favorites up here. So it's quicker and easier to get access to them. And also they are able to be indexed by the smart albums and be searched. Also, what I'll want to do is set my first, my folder that I plan to shoot to or import to as my capture folder, and that's the camera icon. So same thing, highlight the folder that you want, and then you would set as capture folder or use the keyboard shortcut that you have set. So now they're here in session favorites. I'm gonna open the import dialog box window now. We'll talk about how to set up a smart album in a minute, but I just take, my SD card, which when it's over here is invisible. There it is. I take my SD card, plug it into my card reader, and my import dialog box should pop up automatically. So you'll notice now I've got my files, and now I've got my choices in as far as where I'm pulling from. Generally speaking, you won't need to change the source if you're importing from a card and this window automatically pops up. The only time you need, if you want to change your source, is if you are trying to import images that are currently on your computer. If you were doing that, you would hit this drop-down menu and choose folder. The reason you see this sample files Fuji and Phase is because they're the last ones I chose files from, and it just happens to remember that information. So if you're choosing it from somewhere else, your desktop, an archived hard drive, whatever, hit choose folder. It brings up the window, and now you are able to pick anywhere and any folder. And once you do that, it will browse those contents. But for today's purposes, we are going to be pulling from this card, so we don't need to worry about it. If you're doing it from a hard drive or anything like that, you have the option to include subfolders. So you can point it at a root and it'll scan everything below that. So if you have things nested, it'll know to look there. You can also choose exclude duplicates. So if sometimes I have the tendency of shooting, importing, not clearing my card, putting it back in and shooting more. And if I were lazy and hit import all, after already importing previous ones, it would duplicate them unless I check this button. But generally speaking, my workflow is shoot, import the ones that I know I need by selecting them, eject the card, do the same thing over. But if you were hitting import all every time without looking and choosing, exclude duplicates might be something that you want to look at. Where does it import to? And this one is important because this is one that can trip you up a little bit. For whatever reason, the default is the session folder, which technically for organizational sake doesn't make sense. You want it to be the capture folder because that's the organized place where you plan to put it. And if you're curious as to what the current capture folder is set as, you can always push this arrow button here, and it's actually going to pop up your Finder window and show you what your currently set capture folder is. So close that out, come back here. If I wanted to drop it into a subfolder, I can also choose that. It actually gives me the sample path and tells me how much physical space is left on my hard drive here. The backup tab would allow you to back up that import to a secondary location. I will say that I personally do not use this feature because all it is going to do is add that, it's going to give it the file name that you're giving it, but it's just going to move it to a secondary location. So once you start making your edits and doing everything else, that information isn't backed up to that second location. So for me, I let Capture One just handle the import because I use software myself to back up automatically. I have scripts running that, well, the software itself has scripts that do that, and I have it set either on intervals or when I'm ready, I hit the go button. So that one's not one I use, but if it's something that is beneficial for you, you can absolutely do it. Naming is where we choose the file name. Now, if I were to just use the default, which is image name, it's just gonna grab whatever it's written to as card and put a numerical value at the end. It's gonna look a little sloppy and probably isn't gonna be as configured as the way you wanna have it set up. Now, Capture One's really robust in a lot of the options it gives you to make things happen a lot smarter. So you press this radio button here, and all of these tokens can be brought up into the format up top, and it will automatically put that information in. So if you want to put, image date into your name, that's absolutely something that you could do by pulling this token in. You don't have to type it out. Capture One will figure it out. But for most folks, especially if you're working on like a volume situation or a catalog job or an advertising job, any job where or especially an e-commerce job where you're shooting SKUs or have very specific product numbers and the folder needs to match, the folder name needs to match the image name, you create your folder names in the beginning that have that accurate name you need to match, and you use tokens to make that naming so much easier. So I'm going to remove image name from the format, and what I'm going to do is grab the token called destination folder name. Then, because I like to have, it's just a holdback to when file systems didn't like spaces and names, I still put an underscore in between, and then I grab the digit counter, and I kind of, generally speaking, will know if I'm going to have, you know, hundreds of images or thousands of images in a folder. I prefer to keep only a couple hundred per folder because it speeds up Capture One's preview generation and makes it easier as I'm navigating from folder to folder. It's not saying you can't have 1,000 images in a single shot folder in Capture One. You absolutely can, and it will handle it, but preview generation speeds will take a bit longer. So I'm gonna do a 3-digit counter just for now, and I can now save this as a user preset. You'll notice I actually already did this, but I'm going to do it again. I'm going to call it folder name plus 3-digit. So this indicates to me it's pulling the file name from the folder name that I have currently set as my capture folder, and 3-digit means it's a 3-digit counter. So I'm going to hit OK. And now what you see happens here is dynamically, it changes and it gives me my sample because I have my current capture folder set as shot_01. You will see that this is shot_01_001. So it's going to start from frame 1. You can change that. You can have it be consecutive if you would like, and everything roll over the whole time. All comes down to how you want to have that set up. If I want to add metadata on import, I can, but it's just the copyright field and a description. So you can totally do that, or you can do metadata after the fact, which is what I do. We'll talk about metadata in a later class. Adjustments are for front loading on import. You can pick from the built-in styles that Capture One gives you, built-in presets that Capture One gives you, or any user-created presets. Presets can be just a simple curve. It can be just, oh, interesting. Metadata might be handled over here if we want to do that. I'm going to have to talk about that later. Haven't seen that before, but, you know, sometimes there's things that I miss. But styles, you'll notice Capture One actually now sells creative styles. They are looks that are helping you achieve your creative vision with curves, contrast, film grain, levels of saturation, all of those kinds of things. We'll talk about creating your own at a later date, but you could front load ones if you already like ones that are pre-configured here as well. For me, I generally speaking don't do that. Each image for me tends to be a little bit different. And then if I pick an image, it's going to give me the file info really quick here, tell me what camera I used, how many megabytes it is, you know, what day I shot it and what time of day it was. So I'm just going to pick a couple images here really fast to import. All right, we're going to import these 12 images. Now you'll see it's automatically gone to the folder. It's giving me my activities, showing me that they're importing, that I'm generating previews. All of my files are in. I'm still generating a few previews here. And now I'm good to go. So my files are in. I'm ready to go. I can begin my image editing. So I can toggle through. I can start to rate my images. I'm just simply using my arrow keys to toggle right now, my number pad on my keyboard to add stars really quick because I want to showcase smart albums really fast before taking questions. So right now, by default, Capture One is going to give you 2 smart albums. There's a 5-star and an all image. The all image is going to show every single image that's indexed in favorites right now. So if you forgot to add a shot folder favorites, it won't show up in all images. So this allows you just really quick to look at everything you've shot. 5 stars is a pre-configured smart album that just shows you any image that has a 5-star rating on it. I can create more smart albums and do whatever I need with that. So I would click the plus symbol here. I would give it a title. I'm going to call this one 3+ stars. And so what I want this one to do, because my personal editing when I come back from the shoot, is I sit down, I look through, and I just give a 3 to anything that I like. If I see one that I know is amazing, I'll probably put a 4 or a 5 on it, but I start with a 3. So I have created a smart album that is, my search criteria is based on rating, and you can choose any of these things. So my example before, where I only talked about a few topics, you have a whole lot more. You can have a smart album by keywords, by process state, camera lens, camera serial number, camera make or model, you know, what ISO you shot at. Say you want to see everything you shot at ISO 10,000. You can set up a folder that's going to return those results. But for this purpose, I'm going to do rating. So now I can pick either equals to, is not equal to, so I can show the opposite of that. I can do greater than or equal to. So I use this one a lot, and then I pick 3. So once I create this smart album, and if I choose that, you'll notice I have a 3-star, a 3-star, a 5-star. And if I were to say, take this image, make it a 4, it stays in here. But say now I'm shortening my edit. I'm like, you know what? I don't like this one. So I'm going to make it a 2. While it's decent, it's not for today's project. And it drops out of this folder, but it isn't deleted. It's not gone. It's just no longer shown in that smart album anymore. I can also make combinations. So I can do, let's say, I want to do color tag is, I can do is or is not with color tag. So these variables change depending upon what you're picking. So I want to do a green, and then I want to do anything that's starred and green tags. So I'm going to pick rating again, is greater than or equal to, and I'm going to pick 1 star. And then I'm going to title this green tags and stars. So when I hit OK and I pick this, apparently I didn't put a green tag and a star on anything, but let's change that. Green and a star. So when I come over to it here, oh, that's fun. What did I do wrong? So sometimes you can do things wrong, even if you're me. Let me get over here and I can actually edit my smart album. There we go. I actually didn't click the green in green star. I must have clicked just above it for the green tag. So that's why it didn't return any results. It wasn't looking for a color. It was actually looking for the opposite of a color. So here we go. So now I've got these here. So that's what Smart Albums enables you to do. So this allows you to get in, get organized, and start organizing, culling, and getting through all of your images in a smarter and faster fashion. We're not going to talk about image editing today. We're not going to talk about how to use your curves tool, your histogram tool, or any of that. I'm actually going to jump in and start taking the questions now, so we can get moving on those. Is it possible to rename a session? Yes, it is possible to rename a session, Leslie. So Leslie Kahan has asked, is it possible to rename a session? Yes. However, in order to rename a session, you must quit Capture One and do it through Finder. If you do not, you're going to crash Capture One, more than likely, because the only place that you can rename a session is in Finder. If you do it while that session is open and Capture One is open, you'll crash Capture One and likely corrupt the session. So if I wanted to rename this specific session today, I would quit Capture One. I would come back to Finder, open a new Finder window. Pictures. I'm going to go back to the one that I just made. And because this one was a little confusing because I had already pre-built one with the same name, I could just simply double click in, change the name. And what I would probably want to do is make my root folder have the same new name so everything makes sense. And now all I would need to do is just double click on that session database file, and it automatically opens this session up from the same location. And everything is inside working the same way we had it before. All right. Is a folder and a collection the same thing? Leslie Kahan asks. I notice if you click create new folder, it says create new collection. Let's see, is folder collection the same thing? Yeah, folder is a collection. if I go to create new folder, though I am curious where you are creating new, hang on. It's not that one. Leslie, could you actually chime back in where specifically you are creating that? Because that'll enable me to answer that question further. So if you could chat that over in the Q&A really quick, I'll move on to your next one. Other than stars, what can you do to reject an image? This is all Leslie asks. Other than stars, what can you do to reject an image? This is highly up to you and how you want to handle this. Every user is going to be different. A lot of the photographers that I used to work for stars always meant that they were selects of some type, and the hierarchy order of stars, the higher the star, the more they liked it. Most of the people I worked with to reject an image would use, let's say, the red color tag. That generally speaking meant we don't like this one. Red is a stop sign. That's what it always meant to me. However, I have met art directors that use red as a color for things they love or things that are maybes. So it comes down to you. But as far as rating and picking images, you have stars and colors. So if you want to flag something as one you know you don't like, you could use colors for that. Or you could simply, you could create a secondary folder that says rejects. I could come over to, you know, my new session here, and I could create a folder called rejects. And you'll see that there it is. I could move images there, and then they just wouldn't even show up in the shot folder anymore. You could send them to the trash. It really all comes down to whether or not you want to keep them, and you want to keep them in the same place. All right, Raul asks, when working inside a smart album, if I downgrade the rating, would that reflect in my real folder? Absolutely, Raul. That is definitely how it works. So as I just showed, let me come up to here. If I downgrade this to 2 in the smart album, and I come back over to shot folder 1, you'll notice that it's there. It's dynamic and it carries through. That's why if I were to be in, you know, my 5-star folder, and I make this a 4-star, it's no longer in that album, but that image still exists here and still has those 4 stars on it. David Kinchin asks, is there a quick way to switch between the view for sessions and catalogs in the library view? You mean you've got, if you have, I mean, I guess the drop down is going to be the quickest way to switch between them. It'll all depend on if you have it configured to have multiple windows open or not, if you need both of them open at the same time. So this will drop down and can allow me to switch. So I can choose this catalog. So you'll see the drop down says session, lets you know what they are. So I can come over and quickly pop over to this catalog. And because I have the ability to have 2 windows up at the same time, I'll have them both up. And if I wanted to switch between these windows, if I'm on a Mac, I can hit Command and that little key underneath Escape will actually toggle between the 2 open windows. So I hope that answers it for you, David. If it doesn't, let me know. So Michelle or Michael Navziger asked, does a smart folder setup work only on a specific folder or on all captures? Smart album is going to search every folder that's been added to favorites. So, you know, I've got this, I've got shot 6 down here in my view. I haven't added to favorites. It doesn't have a heart next to it. So if I take this image and click and drag it, which is how you move between, you can easily move your files between places to live. This is how you can easily get things to different places. If I move it here, right? So I've got this this beautiful Buick LeSabre that time has not apparently forgotten, or has forgotten, however you want to look at it. It has a green tag and stars on it. So if I go to my green tag and stars, you will notice it doesn't return as a search result because this folder isn't added as a favorite. So if I were to click on it quickly and add it to favorites, now it can see it. So yes, it's going to only work on the folders you've added to favorites. The anonymous question about sequencing of focus stacking into sessions, we are not talking about that today. That's going to be for an advanced class that we're going to speak on specifically on focus stacking. We're just talking about setting up a basic session right now for a first go. In session folders, Leslie Kahn has revised her question. In session folders, if you right click on capture folder, the option new comes up, and new folder is an option. If you click that, it says new collection name. New, for me, it says folder. Oh, new collection name. Yeah, sorry. That just means I wasn't realizing what you're asking. Yes, new collection name means what do you want to name this new folder that you are making? So this one would be, hang on. 07. And that adds right in. So there we go. Oh, just use why collection and album are being used interchangeably. Okay, so Leslie asked, just confused as why collection and album are being used interchangeably. Collection is a physical folder, album is a virtual folder. Albums are a virtual organization where you can put things, but it doesn't actually give you a folder. For physical folders, they're collections, and that's how that runs. It is a little bit confusing. Remember that it's a Danish piece of software, and some names and things are a little bit different. I don't want to say all of it gets lost in translation, but there is a little bit that you have to have a little give and take on. So Raul asks, after working and selecting your final images via smart albums, is there a way to export those images to one folder in the computer? Let's say to give to CD. I assume it's the same process as then exporting from a normal folder. Absolutely. Yeah. So yes. Hang on. Give me a second. So if I have, say these are my final images here, and I know this is what I want to output. If I just grab these images and hit process, just those are going to process. If I want to physically move these raw files into a new location or physically put them on a hard drive, I can simply click and drag from here. I would say, though, that you need to be careful with clicking and dragging because it does move the image. If you click, hold down Option, and drag to a new location, then it will copy them. Or if you're clicking, dragging to an external disk or a thumb drive or something like that, then it'll automatically copy because it's not the same volume. But yeah, it works pretty much the same way. I believe, I forgot one more open question over here. Do you plan to review your process of culling images? I actually plan on, because this is a short bit, I plan on doing a specific webinar just on culling and how to move through quickly, because we just don't have enough time. We're actually just about out of time today. So right now, what I want to do is, let me double check. We've got all the questions answered. I wanted to thank you all for coming. I really appreciate you tuning in and joining us during these strange times. We want to share as much information with you as we can. We do have more webinar. We do have more webinar Capture One series coming up. You can always get support for Capture One through their website, downloads, or the support tab. Release notes are really important. You can also always contact PhotoCare at support@photocare.com. While the store is closed, the support team, myself included, is still answering questions. Our next Capture One class is going to be shooting tethered with sessions. This is going to be very basic tethered shooting in live view. We're not going to have any focus stacking today that needs a phase one camera that I have to pick up. Capture One 20 sorry, the tethered shooting is going to be Wednesday, April 15th, also at 2 p.m. And then I'm going to have an output and file processing options webinar on Thursday, April 16th at 2 p.m. So those are the next two classes we've got. You can head on over to the PhotoCare events page, and you'll be able to register for those. The recording for this is going to be live as soon as, you know, the YouTube servers realistically allow that to be processed and uploaded. Keep in mind, you know, it'll live on our YouTube page, our Instagram TV. Those items are all kind of with the large volume of people uploading video content, it's a little bit slower, but maybe the end of today, but more likely tomorrow, both will be up and live. I definitely wanted to thank the whole PhotoCare team for helping back me up on this. There's a lot that goes into the pre-setup. So Manny's been an amazing help. John Schlesinger has been an amazing help. John Koch has been an amazing help. The entire team has been really coming through and making these possible. So I want to thank them as well. Looking forward to seeing you all next week, next Wednesday. Be well and stay safe between now and then. Thank you so much for coming.